Hey man, there's a silent power that doesn't come from tactics, tricks, or emotional manipulation. It comes from something far deeper, alignment. And when you move from a place of alignment, you don't need to play games to hold power. You don't need to pretend you're unavailable, ghost her to stir anxiety, or act like you don't care when you do. Instead, you become a man who maintains power simply by refusing to give it away, not by force, but by choice. By moving through life as if your value is never dependent on how someone treats you, reacts to you, or validates you. Because here's the truth. Women don't respect men who play games. They watch them, they may flirt with them, entertain them, but they don't trust them. And if a woman can't trust your center, she'll never give you her depth. But when you're consistent, not in routine, but in energy, she starts to feel something rare. She feels a man who doesn't need to manipulate the rhythm to feel in control. A man who leads from stillness, not strategy. And that kind of energy creates a space she wants to stay in, not because you tricked her, but because you anchored her. You maintain power by building a life so rich, so purpose-filled, so deeply yours, that you don't need a woman to feel like a man. You enjoy her presence, but you don't crave it. You value connection, but you don't need it. You move with or without her. You stay grounded even when emotions pull. And that emotional independence, that's what makes your presence so attractive. Because now you're no longer signaling, I'll do anything to keep you. You're saying, I'm already kept by my own vision. And that truth, it draws her in deeper than any tactic ever could. The reason most men resort to games is because they don't believe they're enough when they're just themselves. So they fake distance, they fake mystery, they fake disinterest, hoping it sparks desire. And for a while it might, but it always collapses. Why? Because tension built on performance requires more performance, and eventually she sees through it. But a man who is genuinely composed, who's not cold, but just calm in his self-worth, never has to put on an act. His silence is real, his timing is natural. His presence doesn't require performance to maintain impact. Power is presence without pressure, it's attention without attachment. And when a woman feels that, she relaxes, not because you're giving her everything, but because you're giving from a place that doesn't demand a return. You're not love bombing, you're not withdrawing affection to create insecurity, you're just moving with intention. And that intention feels safe, seductive, and sovereign, because you're not playing the game, you're setting the standard, quietly, steadily, without needing her to play along. You hold your power by honoring your boundaries, not by enforcing them through ultimatums, but by living them. When you don't tolerate disrespect, you don't argue about it. You just leave the space that allowed it. When she's inconsistent, you don't guilt her, you just disengage emotionally. Not as a punishment, but as a principle. And that principle says, I don't force connection, I invite alignment. And if someone isn't aligned, you let go. Not out of bitterness, but because your peace matters more than keeping someone who's not ready for your presence. You also stay emotionally neutral when you're tested. You don't reward bad behavior with attention. You don't chase after mood swings. You don't react when she gets cold. You simply observe and adapt. And when you respond, when you finally speak, you do so from grounded awareness, not emotional reactivity. That restraint, that calm, that's power. Because you're no longer playing defense. You're holding frame, you're responding from truth, not trying to win, not trying to avoid loss, just staying rooted in who you are. One of the strongest signals of real power is non-urgency. You don't rush intimacy, you don't force closeness, you let it unfold, and that pacing says everything. It says, I'm not in a hurry to be chosen, I've already chosen myself. That energy is rare, and because it's rare, it attracts deeply. Women start wondering why you're not more eager, why you're not more reactive, and that curiosity, it creates pull. Not because you manipulated her, but because you didn't need her rhythm to define yours. You also stop explaining yourself to be liked. You don't over-justify your choices. You don't need people to understand every move. You're polite, you're open, but you're not performing for validation. You say what you mean, you do what you say, and if it's misunderstood, you don't panic. You let people think what they want, because your identity isn't built on their interpretations. That quiet confidence, it's unbreakable, because no woman can test you into proving yourself when you've already approved yourself from within. This doesn't mean you never show emotion, It means your emotion doesn't own you. You don't suppress, you direct. You don't explode, you express with clarity. When you're hurt, you speak with stillness. When you're joyful, you show it without needing applause. That emotional range, paired with discipline, is what makes your power feel safe. And when a woman senses safety without softness, she starts giving you more of her depth. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it without games. You also keep your power by not being triggered by her unpredictability. One moment she's warm, the next she's distant. One day she's pouring her heart out, the next she's short with her words. And the average guy, he gets caught in that emotional tide. He starts overanalyzing, over-texting, overthinking. But you don't react. You observe, you watch the rhythm, but you don't lose your own tempo. You're not cold, you're just unmoved by temporary weather. And that makes her feel something she's not used to feeling: stability without demand. And that, brother, is one of the rarest forms of power a man can offer. You also stop negotiating your standards. You don't compromise core values just to make it work. You don't accept half effort just to avoid being alone. You'd rather be in solitude than sit beside someone who can't respect your time, your vision, or your presence. That quiet resolve, it's not bitterness, it's not ego, it's clarity. And clarity is power, because once you know what you stand for, you stop bending for people who don't. And the more you hold that line, the more she realizes you're not just a man she's attracted to, you're a man she can trust. One of the cleanest ways to maintain power is to simply never operate from emotional scarcity. You don't panic when someone pulls away. You don't obsess when she stops responding. You don't spiral when plans fall through. Why? Because your mind isn't attached to outcomes, it's anchored in direction. You trust that what's aligned will move toward you, and what doesn't, wasn't supposed to stay anyway. That kind of emotional detachment isn't cold, it's liberating, because now you're not holding power, or all power, and power doesn't beg, it selects. You also stop matching energy. That trend you see everywhere, match her vibe, is rooted in insecurity. You're not a mirror. You're a leader. When she pulls back, you don't chase. When she acts cold, you don't imitate it. When she's unsure, you don't become unsure. You hold, you lead, you offer warmth without weakness, direction without dominance. And if she can't match it, you don't lower your energy, you release hers. And that discipline, it creates an emotional container she wants to fill, because it wasn't built on reacting to her moods, but holding to your values. You also maintain power by embracing silence. When a woman goes distant, you don't fill the gap with texts, calls, or long-winded explanations. You don't chase her attention, you let the space speak for itself, because the man who's confident in his presence knows his absence has value too. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop talking, let her miss your voice. Let her feel the difference between your presence and your distance. That contrast, it teaches her that access to you is not a guarantee, it's a privilege. One that's earned, not demanded. Real power also shows up in your ability to say no without guilt. You don't agree just to keep peace. You don't say yes just to avoid conflict. You don't go with the flow if the flow isn't right for you. And when she sees that your no is firm, not cruel, but centered, clear and calm, she respects it. Because you're not saying no to control her. You're saying no to protect your alignment. And that level of self-honoring doesn't push her away. It draws her closer, because now she knows you're not afraid to lose a moment to protect your mission. You don't need to disappear to gain power. That's a game. That's manipulation. Instead, you become selective. You give less of yourself to those who give you less of them. Not out of punishment, but out of emotional conservation. You know your time, attention, and presence are resources, and you treat them like currency. And currency that flows to what appreciates it is currency that never loses value. So you keep investing where there's reciprocity, and withdrawing where there's confusion. And in that rhythm, you stay powerful without ever having to pull away just to be missed. Your power also lives in your purpose. You wake up with direction, you move with structure. You're building something inside and out. And that mission, it shapes your aura. It gives you a certain weight when you enter a room. Because now you're not trying to be interesting, you are. Not because you said something clever, but because you're living with intention. And women feel that. They feel it in your delayed replies, in your calm tone, in your unwavering posture. You're not just passing time, you're choosing moments. And that level of intentionality makes you unforgettable. Eventually, she'll say something like, "You just feel different," or "I can't read you." That's not confusion, it's respect. Because you've shown her something real. You've shown her what it looks like when a man moves without tactics, without games, without trying to win her. You just are. Steady, focused, centered. And that consistency, it breaks her patterns. Because now, she doesn't have to decode mixed signals. She's just learning how to rise to meet a man who doesn't lower himself to be kept. So remember this, man. You don't need tricks to hold power. You don't need silence games, timed replies, or fake detachment. What you need is presence, purpose, and personal rhythm. You need to stop negotiating your peace. You need to speak when it matters, and stay silent when it doesn't. You need to give freely, but only where it's earned. And when you live that way, you become the kind of man who's not playing the game, he's setting the tone. And every woman you meet will either step into that tone or step away. Either way, you remain unshaken.